It's finally happening! Amphibia's endgame war is about to take place, and I'm still not mentally prepared. It still doesn't even feel real, not gonna lie. We're actually gonna be getting our first 48-minute special for the show, too. It's truly a time to be alive. If you couldn't tell by the title, I'm just gonna be focusing on the beginning of the end for this video. The 48-minute special all in should end up being a full episode breakdown, though, so look forward to that. Considering how this episode started, the first thing I want to talk about is Marcy and how this episode added a lot more depth to her character. In a flashback, we see her and Anne and Sasha having a sleepover at Anne's place. Marcy's getting super hyped about this movie called War of the Warlocks, which even though it was only shown in this episode for a brief moment, was a great way to foreshadow / set up how Anne and the rest of the Resistance were going to treat their assault on Newtopia Castle. But if you saw this episode already, you know that the plan ended up backfiring, since thanks to the Corps having access to Marcy's memories, Darcy was able to figure out how the Resistance plan would play out. Back on the topic of the movie though, Marcy was super passionate about showing this movie to her friends. That's just who she is. She's an incredibly passionate person when it comes to her interests and wants to share them with people she's close to, in hopes of them being able to get just as excited as she does when it comes to these interests, or at the very least, you know, act like they care. The issue is, Sasha and Anne are pretty much mentally checked out for the entirety of Marcy's explanation about the movie. Sasha even making a joke about it being spoiled when in reality she didn't care about the movie's contents at all, eventually forcing Marcy to stop the topic of conversation altogether when the two other girls initiate a spontaneous pillow fight. Marcy attempts to bring up the movie discussion again, but to her disappointment, Anne and Sasha ended up falling asleep before the movie even finished. Marcy also goes on to say they fell asleep again, meaning the two of them falling asleep during movies Marcy recommends has been a regular thing in their friend group. Stuff like this isn't anything new to us viewers either, technically speaking. Things like this have been sprinkled in since Marcy's official debut. Remember when Anne and Marcy reunited and Marcy asked Anne if she remembered some details about her favorite video game, to which Anne responded no in a very uninterested tone of voice? This really hurt to watch because I've personally went through situations like this growing up, and I'm sure many others out there have as well, trying to talk to your friends or family about passions in hopes of being taken seriously or them eventually getting into it themselves, just for them to not take you seriously in the slightest. It's a really shitty feeling to experience, even just one time. For this to have been a regular thing amongst her two closest friends, I feel like helps us audience understand her mindset for when she decided to initiate her plan to use the Calamity Box with Anne and Sasha in her presence. It's as simple as Marcy was scared of moving away. The friends that were already not taking her very seriously to begin with were no longer going to be easily accessible IRL if she moved, so it's very possible she would have drifted apart from those two if she did move away. So in hopes of the box actually working, not only would her friends still be around in general, but there'd potentially be a better chance of making their friendship less toxic. Amphibia being a perfect RPG world full of Marcy's wildest dreams was just a coincidence, to be clear. She didn't know what world the box would even take them to if it did work. Her decision to do this was not rooted in her interests themselves. It's clear this neglect from her friends was getting to her, and Sasha and Anne even acknowledge this later in the episode on their way to Newtopia Castle. They realize all this neglect over the years is probably one of the core reasons she decided to have Anne steal the box in the first place. To make myself perfectly clear, what Marcy did to Anne and Sasha was not okay. It was an incredibly impulsive decision that led to her and her friends being away from their Earth home lives for literal months, and resulted in Anne and Sasha's lives being put in danger several times. They grew as people, yes, but it was still wrong to do. However, I don't think it's fair to put her completely at fault now, given the information told to us throughout this episode, combined with how Anne and Sasha literally said they may be partially to blame here. Mainly Anne. And like I mentioned earlier, Marcy didn't even know for sure if the box would work. In the end, they're all still young kids, middle school girls who are trying to figure out their own shit. It's natural for kids that age to make impulsive decisions, especially if they feel like they're losing a loved one. Also, this is a cartoon, so it's not fair to judge these girls on the same standard of real-life human beings when it comes to situations like this. I wanted to clear that up because I've seen some very unintelligent takes about Marcy on Twitter this past week, and it's gotten pretty annoying to look at, not gonna lie. The parallels being verbally explored between Anne and Marcy were amazing too. Anne empathizes with Marcy because of why she decided to steal the box from Marcy in the first place. She was pressured into doing it because she was afraid of losing her friends. I bet even more so after how Sasha was treating her on her birthday right before she stole the Calamity Box, guilt-tripping her into staying out instead of going back to her family's birthday party they had planned. But I'm telling you, man, the thought of losing a loved one can make people do crazy things, even in real life. Things they wouldn't normally do if they weren't in a very anxious state of mind. Even giving a nod to Anne and Hot Pop working out their issues after Hot Pop buried the Calamity Box and lied about it. Also, these two are definitely gay. I don't want to leave out the pure awesomeness given to us by the rest of the Resistance as well as final boss King Andrias. Who else was ecstatic for Wally when the Moss Man he and Anne found in season 1 came out of nowhere to save him from a Furbo? On top of multiple other people from the Resistance being able to witness it. Finally, Wally gets some validation for that. King Andrias though, my god, what a badass. Jumping from a high height into the fray, wielding that sword like a pro, and borderline soloing the entire Resistance. It looked like the other Furbo was still functioning, we're just cheering him on from behind and not even helping. Look, I get he's one of the biggest creatures in Amphibia, but my god, he's stronger than I thought. You gotta remember who's down there working together. Croaker, Loggle, Beatrix, Stratonio, and tons more. None of them were enough to even leave a scratch on this guy. Perhaps if they didn't retreat after the main members got captured, they could have tired him out, but there's no way of knowing. Speaking of the capture, Anne and Sasha meeting Darcy was everything I hoped it would be. The boarding for that scene combined with the lighting of the throne room was immaculate. Easily one of the most visually appealing scenes in all of Amphibia, and it consisted of all dialogue. It wasn't even an action scene. That's incredibly impressive. And although it's subtle, the few interactions Andreas had with Darcy during this episode seemed to further support the idea of him turning against them in the end. The sad/disappointed expressions from Andreas once he returns to the castle, combined with Darcy still treating him like ass even when he tries to help. Did you really need to tell him to shut up like that? Like, come on, dog. Also, one of the final promotional posters from Amphibia was released within the last week, showing not only Andreas looking up to the side sporting another sad look, but Sprig holding the blank letter he found in Leaf Planter's old room. I think it's safe to assume that blank letter is going to be delivered to Andreas in some way, shape, or form in All In or The Hardest Thing, with him being the only one who can read it, since Secret Messages was he and Leaf's whole thing back in the day when they were still friends. Whatever is on that letter is going to decide how Andreas goes against Darcy in the end, I promise you. Then of course, the ending of this episode was just insane as everything else. Not only did it set up potential fights for Anne against her friends controlled by spore collars, but the invasion of Earth finally beginning. The final battle will be a joint fight on Earth and Amphibia, with the portal gate presumably being open the entire time. And based on the newest promo, things are going to get more real than they've ever been. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of this episode and what you're most excited for with next week's damn near hour-long special. I'd love to know your thoughts. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like down below. It helps out a ton. But for now, I will see you guys next time. Peace out. Take care. Bye-bye.